So as he said, I'm a print and public radio reporter living and working in northern New Jersey, just outside of New York. And you may have noticed in my description, and as well as what he said, I was previously with NJ Spotlight and WNYC, New Jersey Public Radio. I actually left a few months ago to launch a podcast to document an 11,000-mile road trip I'm taking this summer from between 19 countries from London to Mongolia. So if you're interested in that, you can see me afterwards. I'll give you a card, or it's called Far From Home. You could go to farfromhomepodcast.org for info. But I'm here today actually to speak about several other big collaborative projects I've worked on over the past few years and describe how my colleagues and I made them work behind the scenes and some of the lessons we learned or best practices that you might incorporate if you want to do something similar within your own newsrooms. So in October of 2012, I was doing occasional freelance reporting for my local public radio station, WNYC. I got a call from my editor early one Sunday, I believe it was, asking if I could drive down the Jersey Shore to speak with people who were boarding up their windows, getting ready for the arrival of a big storm that was heading our way. And that storm was, of course, Superstorm Sandy. And that one afternoon turned into several days. I was driving up and down the coast, reporting as the waves came crashing ashore, causing massive flooding, widespread power outages everywhere, destroying tens of thousands of homes in the process. And to give some context, I should explain that New Jersey is in kind of a unique position. We're between two big media markets, New York and Philadelphia. So we never really get the attention that we deserve, especially on the broadcast side. And so even though there were some iconic images that emerged from New Jersey following Sandy and made the national news, it was pretty clear to many of us early on that news cycles are short. People have brief attention spans. They would move on quickly and to some degree forget what happened unless they were personally affected or knew someone who was or lived near the shore. And we knew that the recovery process was likely to drag on for a very long time. So we wanted, some of us in the local media felt that it was important to continue to devote attention and resources to covering this on an ongoing basis. So with some grant funding from the Dodge and Knight Foundations, New Jersey WNYC teamed up with New Jersey Spotlight, which is a news website in New Jersey, to jointly hire me to spend the next year and eventually the year after that as well to do enterprise and investigative reporting, accountability reporting, kind of tracking the federal aid money and seeing what happened to it all, how it trickled down to individual homeowners, and monitoring the Christie administration's handling of the state recovery process. So from a logistical standpoint, I think this was a pretty ambitious undertaking that had a number of challenges built in. So I'm going to discuss how we managed to pull that off and leave you with some takeaways. On a day-to-day basis, I mostly worked from home or out in the field, out on the road as, rather than in a traditional kind of newsroom setting. So I didn't do a lot of collaboration in that sense, like with the reporting team face-to-face. But the nature of my position meant that, I had several editors and bosses in different places, and who I had to satisfy. We had conference calls all the time. They each had their own approaches and interests and priorities. I was reporting for two different platforms, both radio and print, and for multiple outlets, both WNYC and New Jersey Spotlight, as I mentioned, as well as several other content partners. We would regularly share our reporting. And I also occasionally partnered directly with colleagues at other outlets outside of those two places to collaborate on specific stories. So as you could imagine, this all kind of required a high degree of flexibility and coordination. We had weekly conference calls with my editors from both New Jersey Spotlight and WNYC, so I could run ideas by them and discuss, what stories I'd be covering over the coming weeks. There was a partnership to exchange stories with WHYY, the public radio station in Philadelphia, and their news website, Newsworks. I was focusing primarily on the northern half of the Jersey Shore, and meanwhile, my colleague, or my counterpart, Tracy Samuelson over at WHYY, was focusing more on the southern half of the shore, which is more in WHYY's coverage area. So Tracy and her editor, Alan, would usually join in on these calls with me and my editors so we could all kind of coordinate who would cover what. So it's interesting, kind of to be clear, WNYC and WHYY signals do kind of overlap in some parts of the state in New Jersey. So historically, they've sometimes kind of seen each other as kind of competitors, but we tried to look beyond that, recognizing that we each have limited manpower, so we should really kind of do our best to work together and not to duplicate each other's efforts. We're fairly small media organizations, both of us, and even in a case like WNYC, which has a fairly sizable newsroom, I was still one of the few reporters that was just covering New Jersey, and I was the only one who was just dedicated to Sandy. But this was an enormous story that we were attempting to cover, so it made sense for all of us to kind of pool those resources to a degree and help each other out in our reporting. So, for example, I would spend a lot of time, reading through lengthy government documents, like, the state's plan for how it would spend the Sandy aid money it got. Sometimes I'd have to read through the Federal Register, which was always fun. As I was doing that, I'd sometimes come across little tidbits here or there that seemed relevant to a story that I knew Tracy or one of my other colleagues was working on. And so I'd, pass along that info. They'd often do the same for me. Most of my actual reporting out in the field was done independently, but there were several occasions where I collaborated directly with Tracy or other colleagues to cover different angles of particular stories. These are a few examples here. I teamed up with Eve Tro, a reporter down at public radio station WWNO in New Orleans, to look at kind of similarities between the handling of Katrina and Sandy. This was, I think, timed to run for the 10-year anniversary of Katrina, and how authorities never seemed to get disaster recovery right. And then another time I teamed up with my colleague Matthew Sherman at WNYC, with each of us reporting kind of from different sides of the Hudson River, him in New York, me in New Jersey, looking at why there was such a disparity between the amount of Sandy aid New Jersey got as opposed to New York. Collaboration like this could be really fun and a rewarding experience if it's done right, and the final product will be much stronger than the sum of its parts, but it could also be complicated and difficult at times, particularly when you're at different outlets and different reporting styles, even different mediums in some cases. So I'll give you a few tips that we found that help make that work a bit. First of all, on a real basic level, I think it helps to be super organized in terms of sharing information back and forth, whether it's links to documents and information you gather in the course of your reporting, or scripts and article drafts that you're jointly working together to compose. So obviously, a real basic level, rather than just emailing revisions back and forth, which we tried to do sometimes, it just got super confusing. No one could keep track of what was what. So you certainly need something like Google Docs or something to make your life a heck of a lot easier. But beyond that, especially if you're working on an investigation or a complex series of pieces, you'll want to be clear about assigning tasks for different reporters to take on chunks of the story, track who's doing what and the progress you've made. There's all sorts of tools like that. Some people use Basecamp. I really like Trello. I don't know if people are familiar with Trello. Many of you use it, but I find it's a really great tool. There's all sorts of ways you could use it. One way, as you see here, is Tracy and I, used it to kind of track our stories and show our editors where we were. We would pitch story ideas, and then, as they go through the process, they're assigned, they're edited. It's really great. You create a card for each story idea, add detailed notes about it, kind of the story slug title, the notes. You could attach files, and then you can move it to the next column as it moves through the reporting process. You could also use Trello to organize your thoughts and research on different, elements of individual story ideas, and there's just so many ways you could use it to make a collaborative process easier. I can't recommend it enough, and perhaps during the Q&A, if I'm sure there's other tools all of you use, I'd love to hear some of those as well. While we're talking about communication, if you've got a number of reporters from different outlets or departments working together on one big story or several related stories, it really helps for everyone and their editors to get together at the beginning to kind of clearly delineate each other's roles or expectations, for the process, for the project, to make sure that you're all on the same page. So I'm going to show something else, another project that we did here. This is toxicnj.com. This is an investigative series we did in collaboration with Center for Investigative Reporting. Cole Goins is here. We worked with him and a number of partners. It's called Dirty Little Secrets. We started this a few months ago, and it's to document New Jersey's toxic industrial legacy. New Jersey's, unfortunately, probably one of the most contaminated states in the nation. And so this included New Jersey Spotlight, my colleagues from WNYC, WHYY, NJ TV, New Jersey Public Television, WBGO in Newark, and Montclair State's New Jersey News Commons. We just made a medium site of a bunch of our stories that we did. I'm really proud of some of the reporting we did, so check it out if you get a chance, toxicnj.com. As I said, Cole Goins is here, Center for Investigative Reporting's Director of Engagement, and he could talk more about this during the Q&A if you're interested. But as he explained to me, his organization has worked with a variety of, local media partners around the country on different investigations, investigative series like this in the past. But this project was kind of a new experiment, both because of the number of participants involved, all the different organizations, as I said, but also the more decentralized and organic process by which we went about the collaboration, which, is great. On the one hand, it played to our strengths. Since CIR was out in California, all of us reporters are back in New Jersey. We were much more, intimately familiar with, the area and the subject matter. But there are three different mediums, TV, radio, and print, so we each had our reporting styles and needs. So that also kind of, we reported to our own editors, but there was also some challenges, as you might imagine. That collective process meant that, although we had regular phone calls and, conferences and ongoing email chains, there wasn't one central editor kind of overseeing everything. And in retrospect, that made things at times a little bit difficult. We didn't always probably coordinate as well as we could have. Since New Jersey's a small state and we were all, reporting on related topics, that became a little problematic when several of us kind of unknowingly reached out to the same sources, asking similar questions, and particularly state spokespeople at, the Department of Environmental Protection. They ended up getting a little frustrated with us at one point because we were kind of all contacting them at the same time. For similar stories. And we tried explaining we were all working independently, even though it was all part of the same overall series, but they didn't seem to understand. And so as a result of that, we began trying to coordinate more closely, and we eventually decided to kind of arrange a meeting with all of us together and an interview with state officials that, in a time and place that worked for everyone. And we all kind of got what we needed for our individual pieces, and that ended up working in the end. One of the benefits of collaboration is that you get an opportunity to work with your colleagues in different places who have a variety of different skill sets and expertise. You could cross-pollinate and draw upon each other's strengths to help in the reporting, especially on bigger enterprising or investigative series like this where you need all the help you could get. For instance, I think I'm fairly good at going out and reporting a story in the traditional sense, boiling down kind of complex subject matter, making it more understandable to the average reader or listener, and finding the narrative arc to kind of tell a story. But there's all sorts of ways to tell a story, especially on the web, and thankfully I have colleagues who have been able to help me out with that. I would go kind of with a vague story idea of what I wanted to do. I have some raw data. Can you find a way to kind of help me tell the story? For example, one case I said, I was reporting on the Sandy recovery in New Jersey. I said, I want to see the correlation between the towns in New Jersey that have experienced the most flooding with the places that are, now getting the most aid through a particular grant program. Is there a way to show that? And I will go back to my slideshow here. This nifty map up here to kind of help me answer that question. And the data news team at WNYC also created a great chart, which you don't see here. Using all those tools, I think we were able to kind of pretty convincingly report the story that the Christie administration had misallocated millions of dollars of federal Sandy money to help towns and cities keep the lights on in future storms. And they gave lots of money to places that had fairly little damage, whereas places like Hoboken got very little money that they should have received. And so that's one lesson, kind of tap into the strengths of your co-collaborators to report a story more thoroughly. You have these visual tools, things that you might not be able to do so well yourself, but your colleagues can help you out and report a story better than you could have otherwise. Also, when you're spending several weeks or even months investigating a big story, like I did in this case, you want as many people as possible to hear or read it. You want to make an impact with your journalism. So getting all these different outlets involved, we shared our reporting between WNYC, WHYY, NJ.com, Philly.com, reran many of my stories. So, it helps you make as big of an impact as possible. Our story, by getting it in all these places, we were able to send out ripples. I was interviewed by several other radio and TV stations. Our story got mentioned on MSNBC. The Star-Ledger, the state's largest newspaper, wrote their lead Sunday editorial about our coverage. In the end, the state was forced to revise its grant allocations. Hoboken and these other cities got the money they deserved. And this story, along with WNYC's Bridgegate coverage, as he mentioned, ended up winning us a Peabody Award. So, in a very tangible, very tangible results from how collaboration helped us do better journalism and make a big impact. As I was preparing for the talk today, I spoke with my former editor, Lee Keogh, over at NJ Spotlight. I reached out to her and told her I was giving this talk. I said, well, what should I tell them? She said, tell them that collaboration is hard, has to be a win-win for all partners, and that personalities are important. So I asked her to elaborate a little bit. I'm running out of time. I will try to go through this quickly. From an editor and media organization standpoint, all sides need to be willing to work together. They need to be tolerant and patient with each other's processes and quirks. With my gig covering Sandy, I think there was a bit of a learning curve early on where we at first didn't understand kind of how much more time and work it took to produce a radio story versus print. And that, for example, I would sometimes need to spend an hour or two driving somewhere to record an interview with someone in person rather than simply speaking to them on the phone like I could do if it was just a print article. And so there's extra, complications built in with doing audio. Also for the website, we were usually writing content to be published the following morning, whereas radio is more immediate. And, depending on the story, I sometimes need to drop everything I was doing to file a news spot, to get it on the air right away for the hourly newscast or upload some audio for them to use. Different editors also sometimes have their own versions of how a story should run. So, there were times where we would need to hold off airing or publishing if one of them wanted me to reframe something or, do additional reporting. So that required some flexibility. We had to coordinate both the radio and the print versions of my stories. So we'd want them to run on the same day. You had to nail down, scheduling and release dates, that sort of thing. Which required a bit of juggling. And finally, when you're teaming up with partners at different organizations, when I asked WNYC's data news team to help me create a chart for showing how, the Sandy funding, how much Hoboken versus other cities received. You're working with all these different people in different places. You have to get them all the material they need for their part of the project as early as possible and give them adequate time to complete their work since everyone's on different schedules and, it's like they're likely juggling their own projects that they're working on. And it's even more important if your story involves a lot of data or numbers since you have to allow time to review everything carefully. You're putting out a complicated story. You want to make sure you get everything right. So that's about it. Finally, everyone needs to benefit from a collaboration. It doesn't make sense if you have kind of partners that are totally unequal. Someone says, well, what am I getting out of it? So if you're kind of on equal levels to begin with, I think that helps a lot. So I could say from my experience that it's all much easier said than done, but if you work out some of these kinks, working collaboratively could be really enjoyable, and it could bring much greater depth to your reporting, and your journalism will benefit as a result.
Scott, thank you very much. Scott Gurian.